Hello guys and welcome to my new video. I'm super excited to be talking about Shadowlands and my raid healing video where I'll be talking about every single spec and how Shadowlands raid healing has affected each spec in terms of the class changes, in terms of legendaries, in terms of some of the covenant choices. Again, a lot of the things can and will change, so keep that in mind. There's a very high chance when this video is going to be released, there's going to be new changes coming out, so we'll see how those are going to compare to the video itself. But generally speaking, again, if you want to look at all of the healer changes or the most important healer changes, I made a video about this a couple of days ago or a week ago. You can check that out. So this video is not going to be covering every single healer change. It's going to be covering how the healers feel. Again, this is my personal opinion, and again, I am more than open to hearing your suggestions and your favorite healers. So leave a comment below and things like that. Then let's go and have a look at the best or healers that I feel are very, very fun in terms of raid healing in Shadowlands. And we're going to start off first with one of my favorite raid healers, and that is, again, it has to be Discipline Priest in Shadowlands. For a long time, I haven't really played Discipline Priest because of how a raid roster or my guild roster was like. But honestly, Discipline Priest is feeling really, really good in Shadowlands in terms of the changes that happened to it. They've received a couple of new buttons to press and a big talent revamp. So all of a sudden you have things like Mind Blast, you have things like Shadow World Death, which does not trigger atonement, but there's a legendary that helps you with that and is going to trigger atonement and reduces cooldown. And then on top of that, you have one of the biggest changes, that was Shadow Covenant revamp or talent revamp. This has changed multiple times. So now for 9 seconds, your shadow spells deal 25% increased damage and healing, but you cannot cast holy spells. So all of a sudden this is going to become, again, we're not looking at the spell damage numbers and things like that, because those things can change and will change. We're looking at how these talents or Blizzard's intention here. What does Blizzard want to achieve with certain talents? We're trying to interpret that and trying to decide whether the class is going to be fun or not. So Shadow Covenant looks like a cooldown that Blizzard wants you to press, and all of a sudden you're going to prioritize your shadow spells because you can't cast holy spells. In terms of shadow spells, you're gonna have things like Mind Blast, you're gonna have Shadow World Death if you have the legendary. Again, there is synergy there, and if you don't have any of the shadow spells to press anymore, you can go defensive and use Shadow Man to just basically direct heal people. And this talent seems to be like a mini cooldown that you can use quite often. And then on top of that, you have Mind Blast just by default. Mind Blast is an insanely expensive ability. You cannot cast this on cooldown because you will run out of mana, especially on longer fights. So all of a sudden, Discipline Priest has multiple different ways of adding additional burst healing through their atonement. So all of a sudden you have Mind Blast. You have to be very conscious of the mana. You have things like Shadow Covenant where you can really do these chain bursts if you really want to. And on top of that, you have your generic burst, like, again, we'll have to see if Evangelism is going to be the way to go, but we have the generic burst or setup window. So all of a sudden, Discipline Priest fits burst healing a lot. There's a lot of rot damage fights in Castle Nathria, which also can fit Discipline Priest. Generally speaking, it was an extremely fun healer to test. I have to mention about mana constraints. There has been a lot of mana constraints for a lot of healers. There's been a lot of spells that have increased in mana cost, and that is probably because due to the fact that Resto Shamans get mana tide totem, due to the fact that there has been a mana or potion change, all of a sudden potions have a 5-minute cooldown, at least mana potion has a 5-minute cooldown, and it does not have a restriction of 1 potion per combat. So all of a sudden you most likely will be able to use at least 2 mana potions during a boss fight that is going to be 6, 7, 8 minutes long, and that's not uncommon in Castle Nathria at this given moment. So I feel like Blizzard has been trying to balance the mana cost of healers around those facts as well, and also because it is the standard expansion, so there is generally mana issues, especially if you're used to this whole BFA playstyle where you're just casting non-stop. So keep that in mind. Now let's go to another raid healer that I generally always enjoyed in raids, especially, and that is Restoration Shaman. Now Resto Shaman didn't receive a whole lot of changes. The talent that they got, Surge of Earth, that I talked about in previous video, was pretty weird. It didn't really, fit the niche of Resto Shamans in general. But if you look at the mana tide totem, they're very welcome. They're adding to the utility of Resto Shaman, and I always felt that Resto Shaman was always a very, very fun healer. I have been testing out multiple common abilities, things like Vesper Totem, which felt very, very fun because Vesper Totem healing portion also works with Cloudburst. So trying to work in your Vesper Totem healing with Cloudburst felt pretty nice, and it felt like it gave you a bit of more optimization. You can always move Vesper Totem as well because the range isn't that huge. I felt it was kind of an interesting Covenant ability. It has been nerfed both type of deal. The damage portion has been buffed. The same exact thing happened to Chain Harvest, which is the Ventier ability where the healing was insanely buffed, then it was nerfed and the damage was buffed. So there's definitely a portion where I think Blizzard is trying to add more DPS to Covenant abilities. Again, Chain Harvest felt a little less engaging than something like a Vesper Totem, which had more practical or had better ways of optimizing it if you're playing it smart. Generally speaking, Resto Shaman, I always felt like it had a strong niche, especially certain legendaries filling in the niche. Again, a lot of the legendaries are not really that super interesting, but they really kind of fit into the whole point of Shaman spot healing added on top of their Shaman AoE stacked healing niche. And I feel that's one of the strongest Shaman niches in World of Warcraft, where they have a strong spot healing and they have capabilities of AoE raid healing as well. And generally speaking, I can't fault Resto Shaman. I don't think they need a whole lot of changes in raid situations. Again, I do miss the Legion Resto Shaman, but I don't think that's going to happen in Shadowlands. So I still feel Resto Shaman is in a relatively fun spot in terms of raid healing. Now let's go on to the most changed healers in Shadowlands, and that's Holy Paladin. And there's been a lot of talk about Holy Paladin, about the niche that Holy Paladin is going to fill in. There's been a lot of different talent testing for Paladins because Paladins want to discover in new metas all the time, and all of a sudden a lot of people are looking at Avenging Crusader, the true melee Paladin talent. A lot of people have been testing that out. People have been testing out Beacon of Virtue for additional burst healing as well. People have been testing out different Covenant abilities like Divine Toll. I've been testing out all of those things, and generally speaking, Holy Paladin playstyle, I really was surprised because I liked it more than I thought I would. I really enjoyed it more because I've read so many negative things about Holy Paladin in general, and I was really expecting something like really outrageously terrible, and it didn't feel that way. It really didn't. To a certain extent, I can give you an example of certain bosses where I didn't even hardcast a lot of the Flash of Light and Holy Light spells, because a lot of the times I was using like Divine Toll, I was using Glimmer, and I was able to, just because World of Glory is an instant cast ability, you can't get away with doing a lot of your spells that are instant cast, and it almost feels like the Glimmer spec back in the day or in BFA. So I don't feel it's as bad as people have said. There has definitely been a lot of voices calling for improvements, things like Judgment giving Holy Power, things like possibly, and hear me out, a lot of people have been talking about Infusion of Light, the spells that are affected by Infusion of Light generating Holy Power during Infusion of Light. And there has been a lot of talk about, should Holy Paladin be melee healer, or should Holy Paladin have a choice of being a range healer, because right now Crusader Strike costs mana, and it's one of the few ways of generating Holy Power. So Glimmer was definitely doing a lot less healing, because a lot of the talents they used to boost or revolve around the Glimmer playstyle in BFA are not interacting the same way in Shadowlands. So all of a sudden Glimmer was accounting for around 10 to 20% of your healing, depending on the fact whether you're running Divine Toll, because Divine Toll definitely has a lot of synergy with Glimmer, because it shoots out like 5 Holy Shocks, and those Holy Shocks, if they're going to affect your raid members, they're going to apply Glimmer on all of them. So there has definitely been some Glimmer builds, there's been Avenging Crusader builds, there's been Beacon of Virtue builds. Who knows what's going to be the best right now? I still feel Holy Paladin is always going to have a very strong, solid spot in raid environments, because the fact that damage reduction with Devotion Aura, with Aura Mastery combined with Devotion Aura, are still very strong damage reduction cooldowns, and only very few classes can actually output that. To a certain extent, they still have damage or passive DPS that they provide. There are certain bosses that don't really favor melee, or can be a little bit awkward to optimize for melee DPS or melee characters, but we'll see how Holy Paladins are going to battle that. In my opinion, there's still a very sought after and a solid choice, or at least they're looking to be a solid choice for raids, and they're relatively fun, with a couple of changes, like I mentioned, Judgment, maybe things like Seraphim becoming baseline, maybe Infusion of Light generating Holy Power, I don't know. Some of these changes could really help out Holy Paladin in the overall class balance, but overall I think they're still doing pretty well. Now let's go to the Restoration Druid, the king of Mythic Plus. How is it doing in raids? So generally speaking, in terms of the changes to Resto Druids, there are very minimal changes. Honestly, when I was testing out the raid healing, it just felt like BFA type of style with a couple additional cooldowns, because again, the utility of Resto Druid has improved because Druids in general are going to provide Stampeding Roar, which is movement abilities that affect the whole raid are very strong in raids, and I feel Stampeding Roar is going to be really big in certain situations. We also look at things like Innervate, which if you use on an ally, you gain 50% of the effect, which in my eyes is extremely weird because it should be the other way around. Why should I pay the penalty of giving someone else an Innervate? But again, it is extra utility if someone needs that mana. Innervate can be used on an ally and you still get some benefit out of it. And on top of the fact that a lot of the Covenant abilities have been nerfed, or at least Adaptive Swarm has been nerfed so badly. And right now, as I'm making this video, again, this can change at any given point, but the Night Fae Convoke the Spirits Covenant ability is probably the most popular in raids and Mythic Plus. It's 2 minutes, it shoots out a bunch of healing spells. It is an additional cooldown to press, and it's used by Resto Druids in raids and Mythic Plus. I feel it might get a nerf because it's certainly spinning into the whole, this is the main choice for Druids right now. And I don't think Blizzard wants that to happen, so it might get a nerf when I'm making this video, but Convoke the Spirits has been pretty good. It's been an additional cooldown. The general healing style felt very similar. I do want to see things like Soul of the Forest coming back, or possibly being a viable option, because I felt Soul of the Forest was always a more engaging playstyle than a cooldown. So I do enjoy Soul of the Forest. I do want to see it happen. In terms of the legendaries, there's some very decent legendaries which again might fit or provide different niches for Resto Druids. There is a decent amount of tank damage happening with Resto Druid, can deal pretty well as well. So we'll have to see how that's gonna turn out, but generally speaking, are Resto Druids going to fall into the same niche as in BFA, where they're just pure HPS healers? Will their HPS going to be higher than the healers that provide passive damage and damage reduction? At the moment, their HPS looks pretty good. Again, there are videos, older videos, where I'm testing as a Resto Druid and there's a Holy Priest or Priest doing an insane amount of healing, because Priest ability, Necrolord ability on Holy Nova was insanely boosted. It got nerfed insanely much. So Holy Priest and Priest HPS has lowered by significant amounts. So Resto Druids are still providing good HPS, but will they fall into the niche of pure healer, pure HPS healer that provides a ton of healing, or will their healing be equal or relatively similar to those that provide damage reduction and passive DPS? We'll have to see. Hopefully it will be a different niche than it was in BFA. So now let's look at Holy Priest. And Holy Priest has always been a, I don't hate it, I don't love it type of healer in raid situations. I do feel that Holy Priest HPS, or their essential raid healer, they have so many AoE healing abilities that just feel out of place in Mythic Plus. In terms of the changes the Holy Priest got, they got Circle Healing baseline, they got Prayer of Mending, Instant Cast, which feels really cool, and a bunch of DPS abilities. I mean, they got a combination of Discipline Priest and Shadow Priest DPS abilities, all in the same bar kind of deal, and all of a sudden Holy Priest has a lot of ways to answer the DPS, or lack of DPS. But the problem, again, in terms of healing in raids, I do feel Holy Priest is a very good raid healer, especially for someone who's starting to heal for the first time, or someone who is very used to the HPS or healing playstyle. I think that's where Holy Priest is really strong. They got a bunch of DPS abilities, but all of the time, Holy is always going to be compared to Discipline, because if you play a Priest, you have an option of playing 2 healer specs. So all of a sudden, Holy will always be compared to Discipline. And I still feel that even though Holy got a ton of new DPS abilities, they have to make that choice of casting a really expensive Mind Blast as a Holy Priest that's only going to deal DPS. Or if you're a Discipline Priest, you could cast Mind Blast, and that Mind Blast is going to cost a lot of mana, but it's also going to provide Atonement healing. So I do feel that Holy is still stuck in the whole situation of, I need to make my mind to either DPS or heal, while Discipline can do both at the same time. And maybe you're going to be pushed from playing Holy into Discipline in order to provide better, I don't know, progression, because that's what's happened in BFA. I hope it's not going to be the same in Shadowlands, but it's kind of leaning to that point in my opinion, because a lot of the Holy Priest DPS abilities, they don't really correlate with healing, they cost a lot of mana, you really have to make a heavy choice. But if you're a new healer, or if you really enjoy that healing only playstyle type of deal, I do feel Holy Priest is a fun healer to start with. And let's go to the last healer here, and that is going to be Mistweaver Monk. Now, Mistweaver Monk, depending on who you ask, is gonna have a very different answer to the question, is it fun? So if you play the Mistweaver Monk for a very, very long time, you probably will be very upset about the lack of changes that Mistweaver received. They had for far too long too much emphasis on Essence Font. For a really long time, their playstyle or things like Mastery not interacting with a lot of their abilities was really one of the biggest concerns of Mistweaver Monks. And all of a sudden, a lot of the Mistweaver Monks in the community would say that they need a Shadow Priest-like revamp, a complete revamp of spells to make it a lot more interesting, a lot more engaging to play. Because if you look at the Mistweaver changes or Windwalker changes, those are the two specs that are kind of last. Blizzard hasn't really looked at them. Blizzard hasn't really fixed them. Most of the legendaries are not working. Most of the certain legendaries are not working, but most of the covenants are not working in the intended way. They're just kind of sitting in the corner and they're waiting for their turn to get the changes that they need. But is it all too late? Shadowlands is coming out relatively quickly. Are Mistweavers going to receive the changes they wanted? Now, first of all, a lot of people who played Essence Font build will tell you that it is a fun style at the start, but it gets really boring over time because the lack of depth to the playstyle. Now, you have the option of fist weaving, and I really enjoy fist weaving, and I hope fist weaving is going to be a thing because I will enjoy fist weaving a lot more than Essence Font or Upwelling build. Again, I should mention the Upwelling talent is very, very passive talent. It just basically adds additional percentage of HPS. You're using Essence Font, Upwelling, with Upwelling, and it's going to be a relatively easygoing playstyle. I don't want to be too negative because a lot of the Mistweavers that played the game for a long time are calling out for big changes to Mistweavers. But I feel like if you're a new healer, never played a monk before, I think you can have a lot of fun with your Upwelling Essence Font build. It's relatively easygoing. Essence Font is basically the center of everything, and hopefully fist weaving is going to be a viable or possibly optimal choice in raids, possibly Mythic Plus and things like that, and all of a sudden you'll have two different healing styles. If that's not going to happen, or at least if Upwelling build is going to have a lot more HPS than fist weaving build, it's going to be unfortunate because fist weaving build requires a lot more attention and it's a lot more difficult than the actual Upwelling build. So I feel the fist weaving build should generate or provide more incentive for a player to try harder and get better results, if you know what I mean. So generally speaking, if you're a new player, Mistweaver Monk can be a fun play style. If you have played a Mistweaver for a long time, you're probably very negative about the lack of changes or, again, everything being broken. I know it's beta, guys, but a lot of things are still kind of relatively unclear about Mistweaver, and a lot of people wanted Mistweaver to receive a complete revamp. So this has been my list of raid healers that I enjoyed the most. They're not completely in an order, but they are following a certain trend. Like, I did enjoy the Shaman Priest the most in raid testing. I thought it was a very engaging type of healer, and to some extent I felt that Mistweaver Essence Font Upwelling build is relatively boring and not super engaging. It has a lot of issues, and I would like to see Mistweaver getting a complete revamp, or possibly fist weaving becoming a bigger choice for Mistweavers. But again, there's always a thing of, if Mistweaver fist weaving becomes a thing, they're always going to be compared to Holy Paladin because they fill in the same niche, and all of a sudden, if one is better than the other, the class that's worse is just gonna fall out of the meta complete. So there's a lot of dangers to multiple healing specs filling in the same niche. Mistweaver just doesn't seem to have a concrete niche at this given point, and I really want to see what Blizzard is gonna do that in the next upcoming month or so in terms of changes. And on top of that, if you look at the list, again, I actually prefer Resto Druid in Mythic Plus a lot more than I like them in raids. I feel Resto Druid playstyle in raids is a lot less engaging than it is in Mythic Plus. So I do kind of mention that, or at least I try to convey that in the order of the healers that I covered. I did put Holy Paladin somewhere in the middle because right now I just don't know exactly how to feel about Holy Paladin, because I feel with certain changes Holy Paladin could be a very fun healer, and I really don't hate Holy Paladin. I know a lot of people might disagree with me, or again, I feel in terms of HPS, and again, HPS is not a good way of comparing healers. They're okay, they're not the worst, they're not the best. They do require you have to be engaged into the playstyle. It can be a very instant cast type of playstyle, depending on the legendaries you use, depending on the covenant abilities as well. So I don't hate Holy Paladin. One of my favorite healers is Discipline, and one of my least liked healers is probably Mistweaver at this point, and everyone else kind of falls into the middle group. Again, you have to remember, when I talk about Mistweaver, I'm talking about Upwelling Essence Font build. I actually quite enjoy Fist Weaving build. So this has been my video. Again, don't take this as a complete ranking. Don't take this as a complete ranking, because a lot of healers and their spells, their talents can still change. They can be increased, they can be buffed, they can be nerfed. I don't really talk about the spell coefficients all that much. I talk about what's the Blizzard's intention here and things like that. So let me know what healer or raid healer you're looking to play in Shadowlands. And if you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe, and I'll see you in my next guide.